She was just a teacher with a grocery list and a hoodie, walking into her ordinary Tuesday. Danielle Carter's morning started like it always did. The house was still wrapped in a sleepy quiet as she moved through the kitchen, her slippers muffling each step on the old linoleum. Outside, the leaves rustled low, early autumn wind slipping under the porch door. A weathered sticky note sat on the counter. Diapers, almond milk, prenatal vitamins, sandwich bags. She folded it in half, tucked it into the back pocket of her leggings, and moved to pack her son's lunch. Peanut butter sandwiches, crusts off, cut into stars. Not because she had to, because he loved them that way. Her fingers worked quickly, rhythmically, tucking snacks into the small dinosaur-themed lunchbox. In the background, the coffee maker hissed and gurgled. She poured a mug and set it beside her keys, knowing she wouldn't have time to drink it. Leon stepped into the kitchen, still adjusting his tie. His badge case peeked from his blazer pocket, and the corners of his eyes still held sleep. He kissed her on the forehead, gentle and habitual. "Never think your name is protection," he murmured. Just like every morning, he didn't have time to sit down. Danielle rolled her eyes, not dismissively, but with the sort of quiet affection built over a decade of hearing the same caution. Leon Carter was deputy director of the FBI's Southeastern District. He'd seen too much to believe in safety without caution, and Danielle had lived just enough to know he wasn't wrong, but still wanted to believe in ordinary days. She smiled at him, that half-tired, half-ready smile she'd perfected since their son was born. "It's just Food Lion," she said, brushing her hand over the curve of her belly. "And lesson plans, I'll be fine." Their son came barreling into the kitchen moments later, giggling and barefoot. After kisses and reminders and the usual 3 tries to find his left shoe, they were out the door. Drop-off at Lincoln Elementary was quick. Danielle waved at the crossing guard, pulled a tight U-turn, and headed 2 miles east to the Food Lion off Greenville Boulevard. The parking lot was half full. Early shoppers, retired folks, maybe a mom or two like her sneaking in errands before work. She parked in the 3rd row, adjusted her gray hoodie, its sleeves worn, logo of Lincoln Elementary cracked and fading on the back, and stepped into the store. Her sneakers squeaked lightly against the tile. She grabbed a cart, her hand already moving on autopilot. Diapers, wipes, almond milk. She ran her fingers across a shelf of vitamins and hesitated. The prenatal ones she liked were out of stock. She sighed and picked the store brand instead. Her stomach fluttered, not from nerves, but from the small, sweet somersaults only 5 months of pregnancy could bring. She didn't notice the manager watching. He stood near aisle 6, clipboard in hand, pretending to mark inventory. He saw a black woman in a gray hoodie, carrying a large purse, walking with a slow, practiced gait. She wasn't loud. She didn't draw attention. But the quiet hum of suspicion that buzzed in certain people's brains flickered to life. She moved too confidently. Her bag looked full, her hoodie too plain. He squinted, watched her pick up a bottle of juice, and didn't wait for logic to catch up. His hand moved to his phone. "Possible shoplifting," he said quietly. "Black female, gray hoodie, parking lot soon." Danielle had no idea. She smiled at the cashier, a young man with braces and kind eyes. She swiped her card, waited for the receipt, tucked it neatly into her bag. As she walked outside, the morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement. The crisp breeze played with a strand of hair that had escaped her bun. She reached her silver Honda Civic, opened the back door, and started loading groceries. Her mind was already on her 3rd graders. They were supposed to write short stories today. Marcus would probably turn in 3 pages of dinosaur drama, and Lily would draw half of hers. Danielle didn't mind. They were all learning, 1 sentence at a time. She didn't hear the first crunch of tires behind her. The second one made her glance up. A patrol car swung sharply into the lot, doors already half open before it stopped. Her eyebrows pulled together in confusion. She stepped slightly to the side, still holding the last grocery bag. The officer who stepped out first had a square jaw and eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Ma'am," he barked, "step away from the vehicle. Sit on the curb. Danielle blinked. "Excuse me?" The second officer moved closer, hand hovering near his belt. "Just do as you're told," he snapped. What's going on?" Danielle asked, calm but confused. "I'm just putting my groceries in the car." Neither officer answered. The first, his name tag said Blake, took a step closer. Danielle instinctively placed a hand over her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she said, clearly gently. "I'd rather stand." Turner, the younger one, narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, don't make this harder." Danielle exhaled. Her voice remained even. "I haven't done anything. Can you tell me why I'm being stopped?" That pause, no longer than a breath, was enough. Officer Blake's hand landed on her shoulder, firm. Before she could move back, she felt her knees give under the pressure. 1 second she was standing. The next, gravel scraped her palms, cold concrete kissed her cheek, and the weight of Blake's body pushed her forward. Her belly tightened. "Please," she gasped. "I'm not resisting. I'm not resisting." Turner was already pulling out zip ties. Danielle's voice cracked. "Please, I'm pregnant." The ties tightened. Her wrists burned. Inside her, the baby kicked hard. She bit her lip. Not from guilt, from fear. In the mess of groceries, milk rolling under the car, receipt crumpled near the tire, Danielle tried to twist enough to find someone's eyes. No one came close. No one spoke. Blake leaned down. "Don't resist." "I'm not," she whispered. In the chaos, her fingers brushed against her phone. It had fallen from her bag, screen cracked but still glowing. She tapped once. The name Leon appeared. Then a boot came down. Glass shattered. Turner's voice was low. "That's resisting." Danielle closed her eyes. The cold from the pavement seeped into her skin. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She whispered, "Call my husband, Leon Carter, Deputy Director, FBI." They didn't believe her. Of course they didn't. Blake snorted. "Yeah, sure." Her cheek throbbed. A drop of blood slid past her eyebrow. Inside, the baby shifted again, like it, too, wanted to scream. From somewhere, she didn't know where, a gasp cut the air, and a voice, shaky but firm, rose over it all. "She didn't do anything!" The call came through the scanner like 100 others. Black female, gray hoodie, suspected theft, Food Lion on Greenville Boulevard. Officer Jeremy Blake didn't ask questions. Neither did Officer Evan Turner. Suspicion required no evidence when wrapped in the right code words. Turner's fingers tightened on the wheel as he hit the lights. The patrol car surged forward through late-morning traffic. No alarms, no weapons mentioned, no signs of violence, just the 3 words that made protocols move faster than facts. Black, female, suspect. By the time they reached the lot, Danielle Carter had just closed the trunk of her Honda Civic. The sun caught the silver of the car as the wind picked up a scrap of receipt near her tire. She reached for the driver's door. Tires screeched. The cruiser pulled in sharp, gravel crackling under its weight. Doors flung open. Voices cut through the ordinary sounds of grocery bags and birds. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Sit on the curb," Blake shouted. Danielle froze, keys in hand. One foot still turned toward her front seat. The bag on her shoulder shifted slightly. "Is something wrong?" she asked, voice calm, even as confusion crept in around the edges. "Just do as you're told," Turner barked, stepping forward. His palm hovered near his holster, a gesture more for posture than need. Danielle turned her body slightly, hand pressing to her belly out of instinct. "I'm pregnant," she said. "I'd prefer to stand. I haven't done anything." Her voice was steady, clear, no sharpness, no aggression. The kind of voice Black women learn to use early, soft enough not to provoke, strong enough to assert space. But they didn't hear tone. They saw pause, and that, in training, meant non-compliance. Blake moved first. His hand landed on her shoulder, firm and fast, a grip shaped more by instinct than intent. Danielle stepped back, startled. It was enough. Blake spun her around with the practiced movement of muscle memory. Her body twisted, and gravity took the rest. She landed hard on her knees, palms scraping against the pavement, the shock of impact shooting up her spine. Before she could inhale, Turner pressed into her back. Her cheek met concrete. Dust and oil filled her lungs. "Please," she gasped, voice cracking for the first time. "I don't understand. I'm not resisting." The zip ties came next. Cold plastic bit into her wrists, biting tighter with each second. The more she kept still, the more their words grew louder. "Stop resisting!" It was a script. Danielle's heart pounded, not from guilt, but from the surging fear curling through her chest. Somewhere inside, her baby kicked again, sharp and sudden. She bit back a noise. Couldn't show too much. Couldn't give them reason. She tried again. "I haven't done anything. Please, I'm pregnant." But her voice disappeared beneath theirs. Protocol didn't pause for pregnancy. Blake's knee pressed against her shoulder. She winced. The scrape on her elbow bloomed into a warm sting. A few feet away, her phone glinted in the sun, half under the car. She strained, twisted her fingers toward it. The cracked glass caught her fingertips. She tapped once. Leon's name illuminated. Before she could press it, a boot landed. The sound of the phone shattering echoed louder than any siren. Danielle flinched. "That's resisting," Turner said flatly. She opened her mouth, closed it again, not because she was wrong, but because the certainty in his voice left no space for truth. "I'm not a threat," she whispered, voice shaking. "Call my husband, Leon Carter, Deputy Director of the FBI." Blake scoffed without looking down. "They all say that." Turner chuckled, low. "Right." Danielle's cheek scraped against the pavement. A smear of blood dotted the concrete near her mouth. She tasted it, copper and fear. And beneath it, something older. The slow burn of humiliation that came when identity was stripped before it was ever asked. She closed her eyes, whispered her husband's name again like a prayer she wasn't sure anyone would answer. "Leon Carter, FBI." No reaction. Somewhere in the background, a door opened. A gasp. She didn't look, didn't turn. Her body stayed still. Not because she wasn't strong enough to fight, but because she knew not to. In her mind, Leon's voice echoed, "Never think your name is protection." Her fingers trembled. Around her, groceries scattered. Diapers, milk, a bottle of juice rolling slowly toward the next row of cars. No one checked the bag. No one saw the receipt, still warm, lying in the shadow of her rear tire. Truth was visible, but protocol didn't bend for paper. Blake tightened the zip ties once more before standing. "Ma'am, you are under investigation for theft. Do not resist further." "What theft?" she asked, her voice no longer loud but sharp with disbelief. "I paid," she said again. But they didn't look. Turner leaned in close. "You think dropping the FBI line makes you special?" "No," she said. "I think being a citizen should." He laughed. "Cute." She exhaled, slow, heavy. The kind of breath that didn't make space, but marked time. The concrete stayed silent. The morning had shifted from sunlight and grocery lists to the iron weight of accusation. Someone nearby muttered, "Is she okay? Should we call someone?" But the voices stayed soft, uncertain. Protocol had a tone. It told people to stay back. Danielle didn't shout, didn't thrash. She pressed her cheek against the cold, trying to slow her heart. Every pulse of it moved through her wrists now swollen against the zip ties. In the distance, the store's automatic doors hissed open again. She couldn't see who came through. Didn't try. Another kick, harder this time. Her body arched slightly. "Please," she whispered. "Just check the camera, please. Call Leon Carter." "Sounds fake," Turner muttered. "FBI my ass." Blake said nothing. His eyes scanned the parking lot now, aware of growing eyes. Cell phones, shifting bystanders. Danielle felt it too. Not safety, not help, but witness. Something was changing in the air. The shift was subtle, but it was there. It didn't change how tight the ties were, didn't heal the sting across her cheek. But it made her whisper again, louder this time. Leon Carter, Deputy Director. For a brief second, even Blake paused. His eyes flicked down, a flicker. Doubt, maybe. Recognition? She didn't know. But in that half-breath of hesitation, Danielle spoke again. I teach at Lincoln Elementary. I teach your kids. The words fell heavy between them. Personal, piercing. Blake's mouth opened slightly. Turner scoffed. That's enough. But Blake's stance had shifted. Just a hair, just enough to see her. Danielle kept her eyes on him. I'm not a suspect. I'm a teacher. I'm a mother. His gaze broke. She could hear his exhale. And then, just beyond the edge of their voices, a second sound. A vehicle pulling in. Low. Heavy. A black SUV slid into the corner of the lot. Federal plates. Unmistakable. Blake and Turner turned. The SUV door opened slowly. Danielle didn't move. She closed her eyes. She already knew who it was. A gasp broke the air. It came from somewhere behind the officers. Sharp, sudden, human. Not protocol. Not training. Just disbelief, unfiltered. She didn't do anything, the voice called out, cracking with age and urgency. Danielle Carter didn't lift her head. Her cheek still pressed against the pavement. Her wrists throbbed under the strain of plastic. The gravel cut into her skin, but she heard it. That shift. The sound of someone choosing to see. The woman's voice trembled again. She's not resisting. I'm recording everything. Officer Blake didn't respond. His shoulders stiffened. Officer Turner threw a quick glance over his shoulder, annoyance flickering. Ma'am, he barked, please step back. But she didn't. Helen Dawson was 72 years old, but her voice carried weight. She stood 3 car lengths away, her phone angled steadily, recording the entire scene. Her white hair whipped in the breeze, her cardigan hung open, and the tremble in her hands betrayed nerves. But she didn't lower the phone. She paid for those groceries, she said louder. I was behind her in line. Turner cursed under his breath. Danielle's breath came in small, careful puffs against the pavement. Her vision blurred, but she heard it all. A second voice joined. I've got her receipt. It came from a teenager, maybe 17, maybe 18. His hoodie flapping as he ran toward the officers, a crumpled slip of paper held high. He stopped just short of them, panting. It blew across the lot, he said. She paid. I saw it. Neither Blake nor Turner moved. The receipt fluttered in the teen's fingers like a white flag no one wanted to grab. Behind him, the small gathering of onlookers grew. Phones rose. A mother held her daughter close. The little girl, no more than 8, stared wide-eyed at Danielle, still pinned to the ground. Mom, the child whispered, tugging at her sleeve. Why are they hurting her? The woman froze. Her lips parted, but no answer came out. The silence between them stretched, thick and unbearable. Danielle closed her eyes. Not out of pain, but because the question echoed deeper than any wound. She wasn't surprised by the force, but that a child had to ask. That still hurt. The concrete was cold, her belly tight. Her baby kicked again. Another protest from inside. She whispered, Leon Carter, Deputy Director. Please call him. Helen stepped closer. Her video still recording, her voice clearer now. Her name is Danielle Carter, she said. She's pregnant, and she's not resisting. She turned the phone toward a sergeant who had just arrived from another call, his brow furrowed, walkie still clipped to his shoulder. Helen didn't flinch. Watch the footage. He took the phone, on screen, Danielle paying, smiling, saying thank you, walking slowly to her car. No theft, no threat, no rush, Helen said. Just a woman running errands. The sergeant's mouth tightened. A pause followed. Not silence, but hesitation. The kind that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. Danielle didn't speak. She didn't need to. Jaden, the teen, still held the receipt. She paid for everything, he repeated, quieter this time, voice cracking. Turner finally looked at him. Not kindly, just briefly. Then looked away. Blake's jaw shifted. Something behind his eyes moved. Uncertain. Conflicted. Danielle breathed in. Shallow. The pain in her wrist was dull now. Numbness settling in. And then, another sound. A voice deep and commanding. Not loud, but solid enough to cut through all the others. "That's enough." All heads turned. The black SUV had rolled to a stop near the edge of the parking lot. Out stepped a man in a dark suit, badge already in hand. Leon Carter didn't shout. He didn't flash a gun. He didn't need to. His eyes scanned the scene until they found her, his wife, face down, wrists bound, blood on her temple, groceries spilled like debris around her. He didn't move right away. The weight of it, the sight, pressed into his chest, sharp and suffocating. Then quietly, firmly, "Uncuff her. Now." Turner stiffened. "Sir," she was resisting. "I said now." Blake reached for his utility knife, fingers clumsy. He knelt, slicing through the zip ties, plastic snapping under the blade. Danielle's arms fell limply to her sides. She didn't move. Not at first. The world had gone too still. Her fingers twitched. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself to her elbows. The hoodie she wore was streaked with dust and blood. Her belly shifted under her, the weight of the morning pressing down even after the ties were gone. Blake stood back. For the first time, he looked at her face. Really looked. Recognition hit like a blow. "Your name," he said, his voice suddenly smaller. "Danielle Carter?" She turned her head, not fully, just enough to meet his eyes. He swallowed. You taught at Lincoln, right?" She nodded once. He hesitated. "You taught my daughter. 3rd grade. You were the one who told her she wasn't broken." His voice cracked on the last word. Danielle didn't blink. Her body trembled, but her eyes were steady. "Would you have stopped if you remembered that sooner?" she asked. The words didn't rise. They settled, low, heavy, irrefutable. Blake's lips parted, but no answer came. Turner stepped back, silent, pale. Helen's phone was still recording. Jaden lowered the receipt slowly, as if realizing paper wasn't what people needed. It was recognition. The mother held her daughter tighter. The little girl whispered again. "She didn't do anything." Leon moved to Danielle's side. His hands hovered before he touched her. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low, as if afraid the answer might break him. Danielle didn't nod. She didn't cry. She simply exhaled. "I'm seen," she said softly. And that, for now, was enough. Sirens approached in the distance. Paramedics, too late. The scene was already etched into everyone's memory. Danielle didn't try to stand. She sat on the pavement, legs folded under her, hoodie torn at the shoulder. She looked around, at the phones, at the faces, at the silence no longer empty. The receipt still danced in the breeze near her tire. No one picked it up, because now they didn't need proof. They had seen. "Deputy Director of the FBI," she said, her cheek still pressed against the pavement. The air stilled. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if unsure how to move past those words. Danielle Carter didn't shout them. She didn't need to. Her voice, broken and soft, sliced sharper than any scream. Blake's eyes flicked to Turner, and for the first time since arriving, uncertainty crept into their rigid frames. Leon Carter stood at the edge of the scene, his black dress shoes planted firmly on the cracked concrete. His hands were still at his sides, but his presence was louder than protocol. Danielle remained on the ground, her breath shallow, her belly rising and falling under the torn hoodie. The dust from the asphalt clung to her cheek where blood had dried in a jagged line. Leon didn't move toward her. Not yet. He looked at Blake. "Name?" "Officer Jeremy Blake," the man said, his voice quieter than before. Leon's eyes didn't blink. "And you?" "Evan Turner." the younger one replied, arms tense at his sides. Leon nodded once, then turned his gaze toward Danielle, not as a husband, not yet, but as someone assessing injury. He scanned her wrists, the marks from the zip ties now angry and red. He looked at her face, her shoulders, the way she was still kneeling, not because she was afraid to stand, but because she was choosing not to. He exhaled. To the arriving paramedics, he said simply, "She's pregnant. You'll be gentle." The lead medic nodded and knelt beside her. Only then did Leon take a step forward, 1, 2, until he was close enough to drop his voice. "You don't have to speak," he said. "We'll handle it." But Danielle shook her head. She looked up, eyes locking with Blake's, and her voice, hoarse but unshaken, cut through the growing crowd. "Do you remember me?" Blake's mouth opened, closed. Danielle sat back slightly, resting her palms on her thighs. Her fingers trembled, but her spine stayed straight. "You stopped me," she continued, "with no questions, no name, no receipt check, just a call." Blake's throat moved. You didn't remember until now," she said. He nodded slowly, his face flushed. "I taught your daughter," Danielle said. "3rd grade. She cried the first week because she thought she wasn't good enough to read." His eyes widened. "You told her she was more than a score." "I told her she wasn't broken," Danielle said softly. "That's what you said earlier, right? Broken." Blake's voice cracked. "Yes." Danielle's hands curled in her lap. "Would you have seen me differently if you remembered that sooner?" No answer. Just the weight of those words hanging heavier than any badge. Turner shifted beside him, jaw clenched. "This isn't the place for—" Leon's eyes snapped toward him. One look. Turner shut up. The paramedics checked Danielle's vitals. One gently touched her arm, asking about dizziness, pain. She nodded at questions, didn't flinch. Blake stepped back, his feet uncertain now. Helen Dawson was still recording. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Jaden stood beside her, the receipt still in his hand, now wrinkled beyond recognition. He didn't lower it. He didn't need to. The little girl clung to her mother's side. "Why is everyone so quiet?" she whispered. Her mother couldn't answer. Silence had shape now. Form. It moved through the parking lot like smoke. Danielle finally accepted Leon's hand. He helped her rise slowly, every motion deliberate. Her knees wobbled, but she didn't fall. Her hoodie hung lopsided over one shoulder, the fabric torn. Her face, smudged, bruised, was a mirror of every woman who had been dismissed before being asked her name. Leon didn't speak. His hand didn't leave hers. Danielle faced Blake one last time. "I'm not a headline," she said. Blake's lips parted. "I know." "You didn't," she replied. He lowered his gaze. The senior officer from the SUV stepped closer. "This will be investigated fully," he said to Danielle. She looked past him, toward the people watching. "It already has been," she murmured. "You just didn't realize it." He didn't argue. The paramedics guided her gently toward the back of the ambulance. Leon followed closely, not as an officer, not as a superior, but as a husband holding the weight of knowing he couldn't stop what had already happened. As Danielle stepped inside, she turned her head to the crowd, to the woman with the phone, to the boy with the receipt, to the girl who had asked the hardest question of the day. They weren't just witnesses now. They were part of it. The hush that settled was no longer passive. It was charged. Blake stood at the edge of it all, hands by his sides, a name badge pinned crookedly to his chest. His world had tilted, but he didn't try to straighten it. Danielle disappeared behind the doors of the ambulance, but her voice, her words, remained, and in that space, between memory and recognition, truth had found its place, not in screams, not in outrage, but in being seen. She didn't take a settlement. She asked for their oath. Weeks passed. The headlines had come and gone, shifting from outrage to curiosity to silence. Talk shows sent invitations. News outlets requested exclusive interviews. Her inbox flooded with producers, bloggers, even documentary filmmakers. Danielle Carter replied to none of them. She had no desire to become a symbol. She wasn't interested in TV. She had a classroom full of children and a baby that kicked every time the news played too loud. Leon, ever the quiet shield, didn't press. He watched her move through the house slower now, favoring one side after the fall. Her wrists were still healing. The bruises had faded, but the memory hadn't. The city's offer came in a thick envelope. High 6 figures, a confidentiality clause, and no admission of wrongdoing. Danielle read it once, then slid it across the kitchen table to her attorney, a woman who had once taught civil rights law at Howard. "I don't want their money," she said. "I want their word." The attorney raised an eyebrow, impressed but unsurprised. By the following Monday, Danielle sat in a chamber without cameras. No press, no lights, just 15 lawmakers, 2 microphones, and the thin buzz of overhead fluorescents. She wore the same shade of gray she'd worn that morning at the grocery store. No makeup, no statement earrings. Just a printed photograph held in her hands. She stepped to the podium without notes. Her voice didn't tremble. "These are my students," she began, holding up the photo. 3rd graders, children of color, some smile, some fidget, some are already being labeled before they finish learning to spell. The room stayed silent. "I've taught Marcus, age 9, labeled aggressive because he taps his foot when he's anxious. I've taught Lily, who got suspended for telling a teacher to stop yelling at her. I've spoken to parents who ask me in whispers, 'What do I tell my son when he flinches at the sight of a badge?'" She paused. Not for drama, for space. Then, quietly, deliberately, "I was thrown to the ground in a grocery store parking lot. While pregnant, without a question, without a name check, without a glance at the receipt still in my bag." No one moved. She continued, "I wasn't believed until a phone recorded, until a teenager picked up a piece of paper, until a white woman pointed her camera and said, 'She didn't do anything.'" Danielle let the silence stretch. "I'm not standing here because my husband works for the FBI," she said. "I'm standing here because my child survived. Others don't get that chance." Across the room, pens stopped moving. She leaned slightly forward. "What will you do when it's your child face down on the sidewalk while their receipt blows into the gutter?" The weight of it dropped. No one coughed. No one reached for a phone. No one looked away. Leon stood in the back of the chamber, not as deputy director, but as a man trying not to break. Danielle stepped down from the podium without waiting for applause. There was none. Only the slow scraping of pens against paper as the council began to draft their motion. No one called it victory. No one called it closure. But it was a beginning. In the weeks that followed, the city released a formal plan. Mandatory annual bias evaluations for all officers, community-led training panels, updated scenario drills with input from civilian educators, and one new protocol line tucked into the fine print. All training modules will include procedures for interactions with pregnant individuals and women of color. Danielle read that sentence 3 times. It was clinical, cold even. But for the first time, she felt something stir beneath the words. Not comfort, not celebration, just acknowledgement. Back at Lincoln Elementary, the students had questions. Some had seen the video. Whispered versions of it passed between siblings and phones. Danielle didn't explain everything. But one morning, she pinned a new assignment to the board. "What does it mean to be safe?" The room fell still. Pencils scratched slowly across pages. Some kids drew houses with locked doors. Some drew schools with smiling teachers. One boy drew a stick figure under a tree with a single word above it. Seen. Danielle walked between their desks, chest tight. She didn't grade those pages. She pinned every one to the front corkboard, a mosaic of small hopes and shared hurt. The city tried once more, Another envelope, another offer, this time with a slightly bigger number. Danielle looked at it, then handed it back again. "I don't need a check," she said. "I need your oath." The silence that followed was colder than the first time. But it didn't shake her. She was no longer asking. She was defining the line. By month's end, the city issued a public commitment, its first in history, prompted by a private citizen, pledging to enforce civilian oversight and begin a full curriculum redesign. Danielle didn't smile when she heard. She simply exhaled. A long, steady breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the concrete kissed her cheek. The doors hissed open, just like before. Same store, same smell of fresh produce and coffee, same automatic hum of commerce. But everything felt different now. Danielle Carter stepped slowly into the Food Lion on Greenville Boulevard. Her belly, rounder now, led her steps. Her hoodie was zipped halfway. Same shade of gray, same logo from Lincoln Elementary, cracked across her back. But nothing about her posture said ordinary. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharper. She pushed the cart past displays of apples and cereal boxes. No one stopped her. No one followed. The cashier, a new face, nodded softly as she passed. Danielle nodded back. It had taken her weeks to return, not because she feared the place, but because she refused to come back until it was on her terms, until the weight of that morning no longer clung to the parking lot like fog. She picked up diapers, wipes, orange juice, and a single box of cereal shaped like stars, her son's favorite. Each item dropped into the cart felt like a quiet reclaiming, not of space, but of choice. At checkout, she paid in cash. The receipt printed slowly. The cashier handed it to her with both hands. Danielle held it tighter this time, not from fear, but as a promise. Outside, the wind caught the thin slip of paper. It fluttered once, just enough to make her pause. She folded it carefully, slid it into her coat pocket, and walked toward her car. As she passed the spot, the one where gravel scraped her palms and her name didn't matter, she stopped. The asphalt looked the same, cracked, uneven, forgettable. But she wasn't the same. Danielle placed her hand over her belly. The baby shifted, pressing lightly against her ribs. She whispered, "We stay. We make it better." Then she moved on. Back at Lincoln Elementary, the classroom hummed with noise. Pencils tapping, chairs squeaking, a small choir of third graders thinking out loud. She had returned quietly. No announcement, no fanfare. Only the corkboard had changed. At the front of the room, still pinned from last week, were 23 pages. What does it mean to be safe? Some had drawings, some had stories. One had only a single word, in shaky cursive, "Seen." Danielle stood beside the board during break. She read them again, not to grade, but to remember. The world outside hadn't shifted overnight, but something had. Officer Blake resigned 2 months after the incident. No press release, no grand gesture, just a name gone from the roster. Danielle didn't comment. Officer Turner was reassigned, placed into long-term retraining, supervised by a civilian board. She didn't comment on that either, because this was never about punishment. It was about preventing the next Danielle from needing a camera to be believed. It was about the little girl who asked her mom, why are they hurting her? And deserved a world where that question didn't have to be asked at all. Danielle taught reading the same way she always had, with quiet patience, with affirmations, with steady belief that every child carried a story worth protecting. She still wore hoodies, still parked in the third row, still taught students with names mispronounced too often. But now people paused. There was a beat between judgment and action, a hesitation, a second thought. And in that space, change began, not in headlines, not in lawsuits, but in the hearts of ordinary people choosing to see before assuming. Danielle never called herself a hero. She didn't need to. She was a teacher, a mother, a woman who once lay face down on the sidewalk, wrists bound, dignity stripped, who stood back up and chose to stay. Because staying was harder. Because staying meant healing. Because staying made space for others to follow. And one morning, a girl in her class, Chloe, quiet, thoughtful, raised her hand and asked, "Miss Carter, what do we do when people don't see us right?" Danielle smiled. "You remind them who you are," she said, "and you keep showing up." Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a whisper, a quiet morning, a woman walking back into a place that once broke her peace, not to forget, but to rebuild. Danielle Carter never planned to make a statement. She didn't march or shout or hold up signs. She simply stood her ground on concrete, in classrooms, in chambers filled with policy and paper, and somehow that stillness spoke louder than outrage when she placed her hand over her belly and whispered, "We stay, we make it better." It wasn't just a vow to herself. It was a promise to her family, her students, and to the countless others in the Black community who've been seen last and judged first. This story wasn't about power. It wasn't about her husband's title or a lawsuit's payout. It was about a single moment of reckoning, a space where suspicion met truth, where bias cracked just long enough for justice to step through. Danielle reminded a city, and maybe a country, that the Black community is not asking for special treatment. They're asking to be seen, heard, and protected like everyone else. That asking to be believed when you're holding a receipt and carrying a child shouldn't require a camera or a badge. Her classroom became a living archive of that belief. Of safety as more than locked doors, of justice as more than legal terms, of humanity as something taught young and lived through action. What happened to her wasn't just a mistake. It was a mirror, one many preferred to turn away from. But Danielle held it steady, and in doing so, gave voice to the quiet strength so often dismissed in the Black community. Resilience without resentment, courage without spectacle, change without violence. She didn't leave town. She didn't start over. She stayed, because sometimes the most powerful form of resistance is presence, is routine, is walking into the same grocery store with the same hoodie, chin high and eyes steady, not to prove a point, but to live in a world that too often asks her not to. So maybe that's where the real lesson lies. Not in courtrooms or policy manuals, but in the way we look at one another when no one's watching. In the questions children ask when adults run out of words. In how we choose to treat people when they look nothing like us, when their name carries no weight, and their silence holds more truth than we're ready for. Danielle's story is not the only one like it, but it's one that was seen, and maybe that's the start. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Not for the clicks, but for the conversations that matter. Because sometimes the smallest acts of courage leave the deepest marks, and the next one might just come from someone the world forgot to see.